There comes a time in life when you have to make a decision. Will you keep holding on to what's familiar, what's comfortable, what's predictable, or will you release it and trust that God has something better? Too many of us are living with clenched fists, holding on so tightly to things that God has already told us to release. We hold on to relationships that no longer serve us, jobs that drain us, past mistakes that shame us, and worries that were never ours to carry. But hear me today, you can't receive what God has for you with closed hands. Some of you are praying for a breakthrough, but you won't let go of what's blocking it. You're asking God for peace, but you're still holding on to the pain. You're asking Him for direction, but you won't release control. You're asking Him for more, but you refuse to let go of what's in your grip. You can't move forward if you're still clinging to what's behind you. I know it's hard. I know it's scary. But trust isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing the one who does. God never asked you to figure it all out. He asked you to trust Him. And real trust means surrender. Real trust means saying, Lord, I don't understand it, but I trust you. I don't see the way, but I trust you. I don't know what's next, but I trust you. Fear will try to keep you locked in place. Fear will tell you, what if it doesn't work out? What if you fail? What if you lose everything? But faith speaks louder. Faith says, what if this is the best decision you ever make? What if God is about to do something greater than you ever imagined? You cannot live in faith and fear at the same time. One has to go. And I know what some of you are thinking. I've been waiting, I've been trusting, but nothing is happening. Listen to me, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean God isn't working. God's delays are not His denials. What feels like a setback is really a setup. That closed door was His protection. That disappointment was His redirection. If you could see what He's preparing, you wouldn't be worried about what's taking so long. God is calling you to trust Him. But trust requires release. You have to let go of your need to control. Let go of your fear of the unknown. Let go of what's weighing you down. And when you do, watch how He steps in. Watch how He turns things around. Watch how He opens doors you never even knocked on. Let go and trust God. Your best days are ahead. You can't move forward while holding on to what's behind you. Too many of us are trying to step into a new season while dragging the baggage of the old one. We hold on to past failures, past hurts, past disappointments, and even past successes, thinking that we can't let go because we might lose something valuable. But the truth is, you can't embrace what's next if your hands are full of what used to be. Imagine trying to run a race while carrying a heavy load. Every step is harder, every movement is slower, and eventually the weight becomes unbearable. That's what happens when you try to step into your future while holding on to things that no longer belong to you. That old mindset, that toxic relationship, that bitterness, that regret, they are slowing you down. God is trying to take you somewhere, but He can't do it if you're refusing to release what's keeping you stuck. Some of us are gripping so tightly to things that are draining us, and we wonder why we're exhausted. We wonder why we feel stuck. But the problem isn't that God isn't moving, it's that we're refusing to let go of what He already told us to release. And the truth is, some of the things you're holding on to are the very things keeping you from the next level. Look at Abraham. God told him to leave his country, his father's house, everything he knew, and walk by faith into a land that had not even been revealed to him yet. That's what trust looks like. He had to let go of comfort. He had to let go of familiarity. But because he obeyed, God made him the father of nations. Some of you are waiting for the blueprint before you move. But God is saying, let go first, then I'll show you the way. You're waiting for proof before you trust. But faith doesn't work like that. Faith is stepping out even when you don't see the whole staircase. It's moving forward even when you don't have all the details. It's believing that when you release what's in your hands, God will replace it with something greater. This is not the time to be afraid. This is not the time to hesitate. If God is calling you to move, move. If He's telling you to let go, let go. Because what He has for you is so much greater than what you're afraid to lose. You can't hold on and move forward at the same time. The moment you release it, you'll realize you never needed it in the first place. Trust isn't built on what you can see, it's built on who you know. If your faith is dependent on visible proof, then it's not faith, it's observation. True trust in God means believing that He is working, even when you don't see the evidence. It means standing firm even when life looks completely opposite of what He promised. It means saying, God, I don't understand it, but I trust you anyway. Think about Peter walking on water. As long as his focus was on Jesus, he defied the impossible. But the moment he started looking at the waves, the storm, the chaos around him, he began to sink. What changed? The circumstances didn't change, only his focus did. When your trust is in what you see, you will always be shaken. But when your trust is in God, nothing can shake you. Some of you are struggling right now because what you see doesn't match what God said. You were expecting progress, but all you see is delay. You were expecting a breakthrough, but all you see is another obstacle. You were expecting healing, but all you see is more pain. And the enemy wants you to believe that God has forgotten you, that He has left you, that He is not working. But let me remind you, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Right now, at this very moment, God is orchestrating things behind the scenes. He is shifting situations, moving people, aligning opportunities, preparing breakthroughs, all for you. But if you only trust Him when you see results, then you will live in constant doubt. Faith says, even when I don't see it, I know He's working. Faith says, even when my circumstances don't reflect the promise, I will stand on the promise anyway. You don't have to see every step to trust the path. You don't have to understand every detail to trust the one who holds the blueprint. What you see is limited, but what God sees is eternal. What you understand is partial, but what He understands is complete. If He allowed it, He has a purpose for it. If He is making you wait, He has a reason for it. Trust is not in what you see, but in who you know. And if you know that God is faithful, if you know that He is good, if you know that He never fails, then you can stand in the middle of uncertainty and declare, I will trust you, Lord. Fear and faith cannot occupy the same space. One will always drive the other out. When fear takes control, it suffocates your faith, paralyzes your movement, and distorts your vision. Fear will have you thinking that the worst is inevitable, that failure is certain, that you are not enough, that God won't come through. But faith reminds you that no matter what it looks like, God is still in control. Faith tells you that you are not walking alone, that the battle is already won, that no storm is greater than the one who speaks to the wind and the waves. And the answer always comes. Faith always has. The always reminds you is everywhere. That this moment is not the only moment. That God is not the only one. That God is always the one. That there is no other and no other one. The enemy uses fear as a weapon because he knows that if he can make you afraid, he can stop you before you even begin. Fear will make you question your calling, hesitate on your purpose, and settle for less than what God has for you. Fear will have you standing at the edge of your breakthrough, too afraid to step into what God has already promised. But the Bible says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. If fear didn't come from God, then why are you letting it lead your decisions? Think about the Israelites standing at the edge of the promised land. They had seen miracles. They had witnessed God's power. They had walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. Yet when it was time to enter their promise, fear stopped them. They saw giants instead of God's power. They saw obstacles instead of opportunity. And because they allowed fear to override their faith, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. How many of us are stuck in the wilderness because we let fear keep us from stepping into what God has already given us? You can either be led by fear or by faith, but you can't follow both. Fear will tell you to stay where it's safe, but faith will push you into your purpose. Fear will tell you to hold back, but faith will stretch you into new territory. Fear will keep you locked in cycles of doubt and hesitation, but faith will propel you into your destiny. You have to make a decision. Will you allow fear to keep you small, or will you trust God enough to step forward? And let me tell you something, when you decide to walk by faith, fear will still try to show up, but this time you won't bow to it. You won't let it control you. You will stand in the face of fear and declare, God is with me. He has already made a way. I will not be afraid. Because once you truly trust God, fear loses its power. Fear is a prison, but faith sets you free. Sometimes the very thing you are holding on to is the thing that's holding you back. You're praying for God to open new doors, but you're still clinging to old ones. You're asking for elevation, but you're refusing to release what's weighing you down. And God is saying, let it go. Some of us are so attached to what is familiar that we don't even realize it's limiting us. That relationship that you know is no longer right for you, that job that is draining you but feels secure, that habit that is comfortable but keeping you stagnant, these things may have had a purpose for a season, but seasons change. Holding on to what God has told you to release is like trying to wear last season's clothes when they no longer fit. It's uncomfortable, it doesn't serve you, and it's keeping you from what's next. Look at Lot's wife. God was delivering her from a place that was no longer meant for her. He was leading her into something greater, but instead of trusting him, she turned back. And the moment she looked back, she turned into a pillar of salt, frozen in place, stuck in what was. How many of us are stuck because we refuse to let go of the past? And let's be real, letting go is hard. It requires faith. It requires trust. But what if I told you that what you're afraid to release is nothing compared to what God wants to give you? Sometimes we are holding on to something small when God wants to give us something greater. It's like a child gripping an old broken toy while their parent is trying to hand them something brand new. You think you're losing, but God is actually trying to bless you. Abraham had to let go of his home, his family, his comfort, and step into the unknown. Peter had to let go of the safety of the boat and walk on water. Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane had to surrender his own will and say, not my will, but yours be done. Every great move of God requires a release. You cannot hold on and move forward at the same time. So today, ask yourself, what am I holding on to that God has told me to let go of? What mindsets, what relationships, what habits, what fears are keeping me from stepping into my next season? Because I promise you, the moment you release it, you will feel lighter, you will feel freer, and you will finally be in position to receive everything God has been trying to give you. What you let go of might be the very thing that's holding you back. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. One of the biggest tests of faith is learning to trust God's timing even when it doesn't align with your expectations. You prayed, you believed, you stepped out in faith, but nothing has changed, and now doubt is creeping in, whispering, maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe God forgot. Maybe I heard wrong. But let me remind you, God's delays are not His denials. There is a difference between no and not yet. When God says no, it means He has something better. But when He says not yet, it means He's preparing you, preparing the blessing, or both. A delay doesn't mean God is ignoring you. It means He's working behind the scenes. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. Think about Joseph. He had dreams of greatness, visions of leadership, a calling from God. But instead of immediate promotion, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and locked in prison. It looked like delay. It looked like failure. But every moment was a setup for something greater. Had Joseph gone straight to the palace, he wouldn't have been ready. The process prepared him. And when the time was right, not when he wanted, but when God ordained, he was elevated to a position greater than he could have imagined. Now let's talk about you. You've been praying for that open door, that breakthrough, that opportunity, but it feels like you're stuck in a holding pattern. Now, you see other people moving forward, getting their blessings, walking into their season, and you wonder, God, what about me? But hear me today. Just because it's happening for them now doesn't mean it won't happen for you later. Your journey is different. Your process is unique, and what God has for you will come at the appointed time. If God gave it to you too soon, it might crush you. If He answered too early, you might not be ready to handle it. He loves you too much to give you something before you are prepared to receive it. Sometimes the delay is protection. Sometimes the waiting is the training ground. Sometimes God is not just working on the blessing, He's working on you. So don't let impatience make you settle. Don't let frustration make you doubt. What God promised is still on the way. Just because it's taking time doesn't mean it's not coming. The vision is still alive. The door will open. The breakthrough is being set up. And when it happens, you will look back and realize that God was never late. He was right on time. God is calling you to trust Him, but trust requires release. You can't fully step into the life He has for you if you're still gripping onto what's safe, what's known, what's predictable. At some point, you have to let go. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You have to let go of the doubt, the fear, the need to control, and step into a place of complete surrender. And when you do, watch how God moves. Look at the disciples. When Jesus called them, they had to drop everything. They left their boats, their businesses, their families, and followed Him without a blueprint. They had no guarantees, no roadmap, no security except for one thing, His word. And because they let go, they walked into purpose. They witnessed miracles. They changed the world. What would have happened if they had refused to release what was in their hands? They would have missed the greatest move of God in their lives. Now think about your life. How many times has God asked you to step out in faith, but fear made you hesitate? How many times have you sensed Him leading you in a new direction, but you held on to comfort instead? Let's be honest. Letting go is hard. It feels risky. It feels uncertain. But here's the truth. When you let go, you are not falling. You are being caught by the hands of God. Some of you are standing at the edge of a decision right now. You know God is calling you forward, but you're afraid. You're afraid of what you'll lose. You're afraid of what people will say. You're afraid of failing. But fear is not your master. Faith is. And faith says, if God is leading me, I will go. If He is asking me to release it, I will trust Him. If He is shifting tempting me, it must be for my good. God never calls you to let go without having something greater in store. When Abraham laid Isaac on the altar, he thought he was losing his son, but God had a ram in the bush. When the Israelites left Egypt, they thought they were leaving behind security, but they were stepping into a promised land. What you let go of today is nothing compared to what God is about to release into your life. So let go of the need to understand every step. Let go of the need to control the outcome. Let go of the fear that is keeping you from moving forward. And when you do, you will see the hand of God move in ways you never imagined. You will realize that the moment you surrendered, you were never losing. You were finally making room for something greater. In conclusion, letting go and trusting God is not just about releasing control. It's about embracing the greater things He has for you. It's about understanding that His timing, His ways, and His plan are far better than anything you could orchestrate on your own. You cannot step into your destiny while clinging to the past. You cannot walk in faith and fear at the same time. When you let go, you make room for God to do what only He can do. Trusting God requires faith, and faith requires surrender. It means letting go of your doubts, your need to understand everything, your fear of what might happen. It means trusting that God is at work behind the scenes, preparing what He has already promised. And even if it hasn't happened yet, it's coming. Your release today is the key to your breakthrough tomorrow. So whatever it is that you're holding on to, whether it's a dream, a relationship, a fear, or a past disappointment, trust God enough to release it. Trust Him enough to believe that what He has for you is far greater than what you're afraid to lose. Let go and trust God. He is faithful, He is good, and He has a plan for your life that is beyond anything you could ever imagine. And as you step into that trust, you will find that the best is yet to come.